Okay, yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Naeem's Shorts, where we ask confusing questions and figure out even more confusing answers. Now, I'm not even going to touch that. Let's talk about Jedi's. No, I can't talk about that either. Let's talk about training, which we always do. But, welcome back. Ronin, wandering Ronin's living room, all that. You've heard it before, but something has come up that really has me thinking about what I do. I was recently told that my biggest flaw is that I don't notice the simple things, to which of course I needed an explanation. I was recently shown an idea of, let's call it hand positioning, but it really isn't that. That was just the example that was given to me as to what it is we're actually looking at. Essentially, it's a parry, right? And from a punch from a right hand. So a right cross, quick parry. And I was shown two different variations of that particular move. But the differences between the two, and by that I mean how it affected me, the person punching, were significant enough to actually affect what I was thinking of doing next, which is typically 1-2. Those two punches, everyone knows that it's a very simple idea, especially in any striking arts, one after the other. But one made me uncomfortable, and the other one kind of gave me the green light to go ahead and throw the second punch. But of course, because my teacher is fairly savvy, that second punch was to my detriment, because armbar, lock, break, all that. So everything that you can imagine happening once you catch that second punch. But the idea behind it wasn't so much being able to do those things, it's why those things happened. Why was there a difference in the way that I was perceiving what was happening? And essentially it was just a breakdown of where you catch it. So from this movement, at what point did the contact happen? And those are the little things that I've been missing. And far too often I find myself doing what I was asked to do the way I was asked to do it because, hey, it's what I was told. The teacher said this, the instructor said that, so I'm going to do it that way. And I'm sort of not living up to my training in that sense because I was taught to question everything. But not just for the sake of questioning it, but rather to understand more of it, to be able to then generate my own ideas. And it dawned on me that I have no idea how to do that. Nearing 10 years of training, and I'm not quite there yet. So this conversation had to happen at this point in time. For me, the individual student. And once it was revealed to me how to go about doing it, I realized that it is something that has been taught to me in one incarnation or another, and I can only imagine that practitioners out there have their own version of it. But I found myself not practicing it on a regular basis, not consistently using it to break down what I know, such as this motion, to understand more of it, to see what other things I can do with it. Because sure, if say that's whatever you call this motion, whatever you know it as, that's all it will ever be if you only have that one idea. But once I started questioning, okay, what happens if it stops here, if it stops here, if it stops here, if it stops here? What happens to the opponent? What are the changes that then occur? Do I really understand them well enough just in my head alone to be able to then come up with an idea? Well, no, you eventually do have to try them out and have some physical resistance to go with it to really be sure whether or not. But the process of then figuring out, okay, what can I do with this? Where can I use this? How can I use this towards an opponent? Or what if I get placed in this position? Where do I go from here? Now my brain is rattling on all these different scenarios and ideas that I have been taught, that I do understand, that I do know work. And now I have to implement them. Now I have to start using them outside of the lessons that they were given to me. And now I can't stop thinking about different ideas. Because it seems like you can use this little process for any sort of attack, any sort of technique, or individual strikes even. Because the end point of any one of these things is contact with the opponent. Now, is the contact meant to cause harm? Is it meant to force them to do something else? Is it to get something better from them? Again, depending on the situation, you have all these things that could be considered. But isn't that the process of learning? We're exploring the different ideas and the different possibilities that exist in something as simple as that movement. And then you tack upon that idea this concept that we've talked about before about 360, seeing everything around you and everything within that sphere, which I always love having Rick say because he can't say it. It used to be because he was missing a tooth, but now he has it and he still can't say it. So, but that's my buddy, and he's the one that has poked my brain to the point where now I can't stop thinking about things, especially this nuance. Because it is a very nuanced thing, don't get me wrong, it's not an everyday thing, and it's not like we haven't been taught some version of it before, but to do it on a regular basis, and to get so good at it that the moment that we see something being shown to us, we can break it down, not just based on what was shown, but okay, how do we get to that point? What would be beyond that point? And everything in between. What are the pitfalls that we then have to consider if we do it, and where do we put ourselves in reference to that? That's the 360 idea. We're now not just contemplating the space of things, but then where we're going to be after that, the space that's going to be created or the space that's going to be taken away. And ultimately, that's kind of how a fight goes. It's just space, whether you're giving yourself enough space to do something significant or you're taking space away from your opponent. Ultimately, you want to be in control of that as much as possible. You know, people talk about being in the right range, making sure you're in the right position, making sure that you're doing the right move at the right time. But if the right move requires a specific amount of space and you just can't get that space, is that move useful to you now? Or is it something that you kind of have to put in the back burner because, hey, it might be your favorite thing, it might be the thing you're really, really good at, but you no longer have the area to do so. So what has to change? And if we don't think of those things, would we be able to come up with something in the moment? Would we be able to adapt quickly enough to make it useful? Or do we take the time, like we've said before in training, where it's a safe environment, where you do have the time to take into consideration these differences and changes and things that could or may happen, because it may not work, it may work. Ultimately, until you're there, you don't really know. But the more we can understand, the deeper we can get down to the simple, finer details. Well, I like to believe that the easier it is for them to come out when you do need them. And that's what this process is really about. It's just taking what you know and diving deeper than what you were taught, going beyond that particular lesson. If you were taught to do things one way, well, is there a different way of doing that same move to getting that same result? Is there a different way to use the same move to get a different result? All these things are just exploration of your art, of the things that you are comfortable doing. It's not to take away anything, and it's not to replace anything. It literally is just a thought process. That's what I was taught. I was taught a thought process. But now, how do I evolve that thought process? How do I make it my own when I was never taught to make it my own? I was told to do it, but I was never really given the formula to break it down, because for me, formulas work. I input information and you get a result. That's how I learn. And believe it or not, the lesson was given to me in that way, because that's how I understand. So now I'm wondering, okay, what other things can I explore? How many kicks have I learned? How many grabs? How many throws? How many blocks? You know, my stick work. Oh, from here to here. get a full chamber. Why do we full chamber? And all these reasons, all these things that I've been taught before, that I've even taught other students, are now coming back to me and becoming clear as to really why we do it. We're gearing the students in our class to be able to then ask themselves these questions and come up with their own answers and have those answers make sense, and then give them a space to try them out. Okay, here, put on a helmet, here's some sticks, spar. Make it work. Because we can say it, but again, the process of actually doing it, how many of us know it? Again, how many different processes are there to do it? So it's a weird lesson to really sort of contemplate, because there are so many variables, so many possibilities that could happen in any given idea. But ultimately, you're going to fall to what works for you. It's going to become something that you're comfortable with, and then it becomes yours. And isn't that what we tell students? I mean, you hear it in seminars all the times. Go home, make it your own, make it work for you. And I found that this is one way to start doing that, to just think about it and then try it out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, why didn't it work? So the process just keeps on recycling, because even with a failure, which may be a failure in that particular instance, it may not be a failure in another. But to continuously then come up with ideas, keep your brain constantly working, and then ultimately it feels like this would become that process of adapting to a situation that you're unfamiliar with, where you don't have the ideal space or time to do the things that you normally would do. And all of a sudden something comes out of your ass and you're like, holy crap, that worked. What the hell did I do? I have no idea. I'm just gonna walk away and think about it later. And isn't that what we want for our students? Especially when it comes to self-protection. We want them to be able to just do something that works, but it may not be the things we taught them. So this has become part of now my learning process as well as my teaching process. And hopefully it helps you in some way, but I would love to hear, what sort of methods do you use? What were you taught? How were you taught to break things down, to come up with your own ideas, to make it work for you, the individual? Or do you do things exactly the same way that they were taught to you? If it works, then yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? Why reinvent the wheel when it's working for you? But if it doesn't, why doesn't it? And how do we make that then possible so it does become something viable? Again, just ideas, just thoughts. This was my particular lesson. And taking something as simple as this motion, which I did with this hand, and breaking it down into 10 different sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then rotate the hand, and then rotate the hand the other way. Again, all these other different possibilities now, in asking yourself, okay, what's happening on the other side? What's the opponent seeing? What is it doing to them? Because again, the example that I was given, this simple parry, the difference from the position is an inch or two. But in my mind, one felt like, this is awkward, I should get away. And then the other made me feel confident, like I could throw this punch and really hit him in the face. Because God knows I want to, way more often than I care to admit. But I have no problem admitting that every time I attempt to, it's usually really bad for me. But it was just a difference of a few inches. But it made a world of difference in my mind as the opponent, as the attacker. And he was able to take advantage of. So, is it worth learning to do? Personally, I think very much so. Because that's the goal, is to get better, to improve. I don't want to be like my instructor, because he's broken in many ways. But I do want to be able to come up with my own stuff the way he does, and pass it on to other students the way he does. Because ultimately, both of those things are going to make me a better practitioner. I see it. I've experienced it. So there's enough proof for me to then go down this route. And I'm sure you guys have your own stories and experiences. I hope this one reminded you of something at the very least. So thank you very much for joining me on another one of Naeen's shorts. Next time I might actually do some Jedi stuff. That'd be cool. But that's mostly for me. So till the next one. 3, 2, 2. I can't count today. 1. Cut.